Welcome to Seggs Talk Radio, a podcast that explores kink and sex through candid and curious conversations. Join me and expert guests in exploring taboos and unpacking what it means to be sex and kink positive. Go check out our new website, sextalkradio.com. That is SEGGS talkradio.com. And I hope you enjoy the episode.
And it changes people's lives. I tell people, when your ass is off-kiltered, even just from a pooping perspective, you feel miserable.
Sure.
Can you just imagine people that want to take things and can't? It ruins relationships. It ruins all the facets that goes into your own self-esteem.
I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Butter. Butter Wellness makes external prostate massagers for men. They're extremely high-powered, no insertion necessary, and they give really incredible prostate orgasms. You can get 20% off by going to butterwellness.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS. Over 80% of women, including myself, cannot have orgasms from penetrative sex alone. That is why it is so important that we find sex toys that we love. Honey Playbox makes an incredibly wide variety of toys. They literally have it all. They have wands, they have clit suckers, they have thrusting toys. They have so many options. And what's really cool about Honey Playbox is they are very technology forward. Many of their toys can be app controlled in addition to the regular settings and buttons on the toy, which makes it really fun for you and your partner. Go to honeyplaybox.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS, for 20% off of your entire order. This episode of Seggs Talk Radio is brought to you by the HUD app. The HUD app is changing the face of modern and casual dating by giving users a really fun and flirty interface, and also it has bedroom features where you can select all of the kinky and naughty things you're into and show those to potential future partners. I personally love using the HUD app, and I think it's a great system for finding kinky people near you. Go to hudapp.com/sextalk. That is hudapp.com/SEGGS talk, TALK, for more. One of the many things that I love about Mochi Melt is that it is an overall luxury experience using it. It tastes delicious and it looks gorgeous on the nightstand. If you want to try out Mochi Melt for yourself, go to mochimelt.com and use code Thea, THEA, for 15% off of your entire order. I recently created an account on sensually.com. It is an online platform for people to seek out and offer sensual and sex-positive experiences. This can look like being a BDSM provider, a sex coach, a escort. It covers a wide range of themes, and you can really find what you're looking for. And it is completely free to create an account or to explore. To learn more and browse both in-person and virtual experiences, go to sensuali.com. I recently squirted for the first time, and it was a lot of liquid. That's why I'm so glad that I've since found Splash Blanket. They create incredible waterproof blankets for all types of fluids. They have them in a bunch of different sizes and textures, and they are truly incredible and very absorbent. Go to splashblanket.us and use code SEGGS for 15% off of your entire order. Well, Dr. Evan Goldstein, welcome to Seggs Talk Radio.
Thanks so much for having me.
Happy to have you here. You've been on my radar a while.
That's awesome.
I've been wanting to have more doctors and academics on and just really create this well-rounded educational platform. So excited to talk about butt stuff with you.
Yes, anything.
I'm at about hour 2 of that today, but I'm here for it. I mean, it's new to my life. So yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about you and what you're up to.
So I was actually going to be a heart surgeon.
Okay.
So far away from ass. It's unbelievable. But
different direction.
Yes, completely different direction. I was married at the time to a woman. I finally came out to myself and then to the world. I met my partner, Andy. We've been together 18 years. We have 2 kids together. They're almost 13.
Beautiful.
And through this, I just was miserable in heart surgery. And I started to think of, what can I do, specifically now being an out gay male?
Yeah.
What gay services are out there from a surgical perspective? And then you realize that, well, everybody's got an ass, and it's not only a gay thing, but you start to kind of put the pieces together. And I realized that there was a huge gap, literally.
That was a good one.
Literally, in the space.
Yeah.
And actually the space wasn't created. And I said to myself, 15 years ago, wait a second, people should have an inclusive place. They should have a place that doesn't stigmatize. There's no taboo. There's no judgment.
Yeah.
It's, I like to do this.
Mm-hmm.
This is my sexual desire, and I want to do that, but my body won't allow it, or it will allow it, but how do I make sure that I'm healthy and then I'm doing all the right things to mitigate risk? And that was the birth of the practice. It's called Bespoke Surgical. It's not too far from here. And it really started to take a life of its own, where people were saying, yes, 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 I've needed this forever. And it changes people's lives. I tell people, when your ass is off kiltered, even just from a pooping perspective, you feel miserable.
Sure.
Can you just imagine people that want to take things and can't? It ruins relationships. It ruins all the facets that goes into your own self-esteem.
Right.
And that was where I felt like this should exist, and it should exist everywhere.
Yeah. Or somebody has ongoing pain that, because it's related to sex or play, like, then they're not telling anybody about it.
Absolutely.
Which is super dangerous.
Yes. And, even I did a study early on that showed that 92% of gay physicians will not talk to their gay clients about gay sex.
What?
So you start to, and this was years ago. I just think, again, first of all, the training is not there. No. People, from an educator perspective, from a practitioner perspective.
We're not wanting to cross any lines.
Yeah. And I just think that, people, it's this thing, which is like, we all do it, but like, that's your issue. This is my issue. And like, we shouldn't talk about it.
Or if you're talking to a doctor about it, it is very like medical in a sense. Like, we're talking about the penis and entering the, it's like very different when I've talked to my gynecologist versus my friends.
Yes, 100%. And that was where the goal of my practice was, how do I be a medical practitioner yet a friend?
Absolutely.
Because you need that, and to be able to go there, because life, I say, is so short. And especially on a sexual perspective, I see relationships ruined if you're not allowed to, or you can't perform the way that you want to.
Right.
I've seen people completely suicidal just because they can't engage the way that their mental capacity is of, hey, and that's what I do. I match that, right? I take the desire, I take the risk, we analyze it together, and then we figure out functionally, how do we allow you to do what you want to do?
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yes, it's very cool. And I mean, 15 years, like, you are very, I feel like, ahead of any of these conversations.
100%.
Pre-podcasting.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that was the main impetus at that time, which was, I started blogging. I was on Medium. Wow. I was like, all right, let's go direct, because people are going to Google. They're like, I broke my ass.
Oh.
And that's what they were going with. And I was like, well, wait a second. We need to be there, right? And how do we write the papers? How do we talk the talk and then get into the popular press? Yeah. Because I think the key for me was, it's all well and good that I'm in medical journals, but the layman doesn't read that. No. They don't care about that. I think the key is, how do we look at Cosmo and women's health and men's health and GQ and all of these to start pushing the narratives that one, this should exist, two, that it does exist, and what are the reasons why, so that if people need access to the care, that they can get it.
And unfortunately, when many people are going to Google, they're in like a crisis. Like, they are in pain, or, I mean, I'm sure you've had situations where people are very embarrassed or scared to go to the hospital, or go to the ER. I mean, I've seen like the shows Sex Sent Me to the ER, like, where, and a lot of it is butt stuff.
Totally.
A lot of it is something stuck up there.
Totally. And then that was the thing of like, how do we take care of people that get into issues, whatever that is, right? And then how do we also do the education side and the prevention side, and looking at it to be like, when you're seeing 90 people a week that take it up the ass for 15
Can't wait to
years,
find out all the things you've learned.
You start to see patterns, right?
I love patterns.
Patterns in the male space, patterns in the trans space, and the female space. And you start to kind of figure out like, well, wait a second, this is what is happening. And I break sex up into 3 categories.
Okay.
What are people doing before sex?
Yeah.
Preparing, dilating, their understanding. What are they doing for the
anal specifically?
Exactly. Okay. For anal, but it applies to everything, the before, the during. How do they get into it? What's their foreplay? What lubes are they using? What toys, devices, etc. And then the aftercare of like, okay, are we showering after? What lotions? Are we doing exfoliants? What are those things to help mitigate
not the straight
any issues?
Straight men are not exfoliating their
Straight men are not. Well, you'd be surprised. But yes, I get it. I totally get it. But by breaking down sex, you start to kind of see the patterns and the issues. And that was the impetus, one, for the book, which is called But Seriously, which is all about that.
Listening to the audiobook.
Thank you. And then the other is a products company, which is called Future Method.
Yeah.
And Future Method is taking all the science that I learned in the office and putting it into sex. So we're saying, okay, if you're new to the game, how do you dilate appropriately? If you're going to clean out, what's the right douching stuff to use so that you don't fuck with the microbiome? All these things that just nobody was talking about as it relates to just better sex.
And then you end up like down the Google rabbit hole of how to douche.
Totally.
This whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I would much prefer to buy the products from a doctor than from a huge conglomerate of sex toy, The sex toy conglomerates are big and they're hard to navigate what products are better than others.
Totally. And I think that's where a lot of it is. We define things, especially in the book, of like certain positions, 1 peach, 2 peaches, 3 peaches for like, beginner stage to more advanced.
Yes.
But I think toys need to be that as well, especially from when we look at, trying to figure out, and that's kind of the next, this is what's so cool about meeting you and talking about it is like, there should be a rating scale, right? There should be people held accountable as it relates to what we're selling, what the curriculums are. How do we make sure that everybody is all on the same page? The sex market is not FDA regulated in any capacity, which is good on one hand because it becomes stringent. But on the other hand, it's like anyone can do anything and put it out there and people are using it
inside of their bodies.
Exactly. And it just comes to, so that's where if you're going to do things, how do we do things with the right knowledge and science behind it?
Absolutely. So what are some of those patterns that you started identifying early on?
People
what are people mostly coming to you for?
Yeah, I mean, I think people think, first of all, that anal sex should be painful. Right. We start the book by talking about myths, especially all you hetero guys that are out there that are like, oh, if I engage anally, I'm gay. Right. These are the things that people think about. So I try to take anal out of the equation and just talk about pleasure.
There you go.
And if you look at pleasure, there's so many places in the body that have pleasure zones. How do we just focus on that instead of it being like, oh, I'm in that space.
And
I must
women,
be.
The multiple orgasm types I've had, which are like at 3 now, it's like, why would I not want to explore all of those?
Absolutely.
Because a clitoral orgasm is very different from a G-spot versus like I squirted recently for the first time. I'm like, this is a whole other fucking thing. Like
totally.
It's curiosity and there's no societal shame for me to explore those.
That's right. And it's no different than, your parents telling you to try all the food out there in the world. And one time you may not like mushrooms, but if it's by an amazing Michelin star chef, you may like the mushroom. Yeah. So I think again, it's like, it's taking you out of the comfort zone into uncomfortable, but yet learning how to be comfortable in that state, especially sexually. Definitely. And, I think the key first, I see tearing, which is called an anal fissure. Okay. I see people with hemorrhoids, which are these swollen veins. And it's all because people think you can go from nothing to something big. Yes. It's like this thing that everyone's like, oh yeah, just shove it in.
To anything with no... massaging,
nothing, no lube, no massaging, just like, oh yeah, honey, just like,
or if you're turned on enough, maybe for a woman, I feel like there's a narrative of like, oh, if you're just turned on enough, you could take it up the ass better.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's understanding that the anal aspect of anal sex is not overtly very complicated. There's muscle and there's skin.
Yeah.
There's 3 sets of muscles in everybody's ass. And if the listeners are squeezing your hole right now, pull it in. Okay. You're squeezing 2 out of the 3.
Okay.
The third one is the one that's further up in. It's called the internal sphincter.
Oh, that's the one. My last guest was saying you can't feel it or something.
Well, that's the one that you can't fully control. Okay. That's the one that won't relax. There are people that it can, but most people can't. That's the one where you're like, I'm relaxed, and then the partner's like, well, I'm trying to get in and it's too tight. And you're like, no, but I'm relaxed. That third muscle is what is restricting. So we spoke of muscle, and then there's skin. Skin is elastic, but to a point.
Right.
And we spoke a little bit before this of like male skin versus female skin, even trans skin from male to female on estrogens. You start to show that there's a disparity even amongst that. Wow. And so if you have thin skin and your muscles are tighter, you can imagine you're going to tear more, or you're going to have other ailments like hemorrhoids or other issues. So I think a lot of what we try to talk about in the book and in my practice is more of how do you figure out what type of ass you have.
Okay.
Because we know from my practice at Bespoke, there are 3 types of holes.
Okay.
One is I can take anything right from the beginning. And that's about 35% of the world.
Male and female?
Male and female, where they're able to say those 3 muscles are able to work together. Even though they're independent, they're as a unit, and the skin is able to accommodate.
All right.
And those people, and you have to see if you're one of those. And we talk about bringing toys into your play, self-exploration, a guided, and in the book we talk about a protocol of using glass dilators. I like glass because they're appropriate for whatever lube you have, easy to clean, but the pressure from glass causes those muscles to actually engage and relax, where a lot of the silicone-based stuff or others don't have that kind of full consistency to create that.
That makes sense. I have some friends that are really into like the crystals in their vagina, like the crystal wands for massaging. That makes me understand why.
Yeah, because it's the weighted. Exactly. And when you look at like any other muscle in your body, it's the same component. You need to create pressure and hold it for 3 seconds, and then the muscle learns to respond. It's no different anally.
Sure.
So by doing graded dilation, small, medium, and large, and we can go further into the protocol later, you're able to see where are you? Are you that group, or are you in those other 2 groups where group 2 is I feel like I can take it. I am sometimes, but a lot of times it's like, it's raw. I feel a little bit irritated. I can't fully get to where I want to be. Whereas group 3 is nothing's happening. Like I can't get it in. It's too tight. I'm restricted. Like I'm in pain. Exactly.
Okay.
And so, and then in the book we go over, it's kind of anal nopus versus like anal maximus, and it goes over mediocre. So it gives people a little bit more definition, because a lot of people don't have access to my type of care.
Right.
And so like if you're in places where you don't have access, then it's like, well, what can I do to figure out what type of hole I have? And this is that, which then allows you to figure out like, well, what can I do if I'm in group 1 versus group 2 to set the stage for success?
Yeah.
And it's, it allows people to navigate the fucked up medical system and the societal issues, but to start setting the stage for like, okay, where am I? How do I kind of work through this? And then like, what happens if something goes wrong? How do I set the stage for success? We speak a lot of group 2 and 3. Sometimes I do anal Botox, which relaxes that third muscle.
Fascinating.
So there's many people that the muscle's just too tight. And even though you're trying to dilate and you're doing the work, you're just not capable of getting there. And the reason is there's a mechanism in our ass that just is like, it closes. So in many people, the second you try to go in, it's like, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So you have to try to learn to override that. Right. And by doing toy work a couple of times a week, just like you're going to the gym on your own in a comfortable setting, you're starting to kind of translate to the muscles listening to you, all the while the skin toughening and strengthening so that you're able to get into a good groove.
This is totally making me think about like the importance of practice here. And I know it sounds so simple, but like I've never had anal sex, but I've always like wanted to.
Yeah.
But I know I'm probably in group 1 or 2, and it's like, why would something be pleasant or easy the first time in that regard?
Absolutely.
And it's like, it really comes into the self-pleasure and self-play thing. Similar for me with like squirting. It's like, okay, I did it a couple of times with one partner and haven't since, but order the toy, explore myself, understand, so that I can also guide a partner.
Yeah, I mean, people are like, oh yeah, just stick it in. And everyone loves doggy. Yes. But like doggy style is like—
not where you start.
No, like you shouldn't start there. Yeah. And, again, in that capacity, you're not facing your partners. You don't see if you're grimacing or if there's discomfort. You're even though I love the fact that people want to be submissive, and I'm all for being submissive, but not your first goes around as it relates to anal. We need to set the stage for success. So the dilating protocol is a 6-week protocol. Okay. Let's say you came to my office and you're like, Evan, I want to take it up the ass. I've never done it before. How do I do it?
Okay.
It's about 6 weeks before you should be able to get there.
If you're in one?
Well, if you're in one, it obviously you can fast track it. But for the most part, the key is you want to get all those muscles to learn how to relax.
Yeah.
You want to get the skin tougher, especially female skin.
Okay.
So if you think of like you and I going to the gym and we're lifting weights without a glove, we get calluses, right? The callus is from the bar.
And repetition.
Exactly. You need a callus to develop on the ass.
Callus in your ass.
Because the reality is that the pressures of sex are that much greater than pooping. And the mechanism in that space, look, the vagina is self-lubricating. It has much more tissue in that space to take the force of sex. Anally, it doesn't. If you ever look at anyone's ass, for the most part, to the right and the left are those folds, like accordions.
Yes.
And to the front, towards the vagina, the penis, or towards the tailbone, it's not. There's no accordions. That's where most people tear with sex.
Ouchie.
Because it opens like this on the sides, but it doesn't open like that to the front and the back.
Can women tear back there from rough vaginal sex?
Yes, they totally can. And I see it a lot, even post-pregnancy in women, where there's like a skin tag or a tear or a hemorrhoid develop because of the friction creating pressure in that space. Yes, and it's all about, it's delicate, and it's all about pressure.
Yeah.
And so if we decrease the pressure using toys, stretching, working the skin, and creating it successfully, you're great. As you're doing that, you'll be able to know, well, wait a second, I'm having pain, or I'm bleeding, or there's something that has limited me.
Yes.
And then we say, okay, like, can you do suppositories and over-the-counter work and start there? Or is it something that I need to do something in the office, like physical therapy, like anal Botox, or a surgery to correct it? Because you can do all the Botox in the world. I see it all the time. If the muscle is not the issue and it's your skin, that's not going to get you better. Yeah, you'll get more relaxed, but the skin is your restricted.
The internal skin?
Kind of right at the rim.
Okay.
Right at that where it joins.
Okay.
The reason why I think you were speaking with someone on fisting and kind of all that stuff. The reason why fisting works, people are always like, oh my God, how does it work? Because the reality is the first 5 to 7 centimeters is what you need to learn to expand. But after that, the rectum into the colon can become quite large.
Wow. Okay.
So it's the takeoff and the landing.
The wrist.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And so it's and that's why you see people kind of navigating where they're trying to make, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to make the angle work with the canal.
Wow.
But the canal is what you're trying to learn to teach. How do you get the muscles to open? How do you get the skin to accommodate and be tough enough?
Okay. Wow. And so with anal training, you've got a toy there.
Yeah.
And what I'm interested in about that is that I think it feels overwhelming to people, especially probably women trying to explore anal, of like, which set do I get? How big do I go? Rather than more intuitively feeling what's going on in there with one toy.
I mean, that was why the birth of Future Method happened. It was like, where do people go for appropriate access to products, but then the kind of protocols to understand what to do. So in Future Method, I didn't see, people think that you should use these butt plugs and they're like, oh yeah, just put it in there.
What the fuck?
And you're like, look.
And like sit with it in there for a long time.
But that doesn't work because all the butt plugs that are out there they basically, you put them in and where you want it to actually dilate, exactly. It's not. And
so it would be better to like
exactly. So with Future Method, there's these glass dilators that basically are.
If you know me and you watch the podcast, you know that I like watching porn for my self-pleasure rituals. One of my favorite websites to go to is exoafterglow.com. What I have found with mainstream porn is that a lot of it is created for the male gaze. It's a lot about the man's pleasure, and it just doesn't feel super authentic and connected. What I really love about Afterglow is that it is for everyone, and it is founded by a woman. I've actually had the pleasure of working with her here in Austin, and I love their mission. You can also find educational porn on their website called EduPorn, and there is just so much to learn and watch there. So go to exoafterglow.com and use code EXOTHEA. As you guys know, I've been very curious about anal play with my male partners, and I'm really excited to share Butter with you guys. Butter Wellness makes men's sexual health and wellness products, including this perineum massager. This applied on the perineum, which is between the ass and the penis of a man, can create prostate orgasms, which are very, very intense orgasms. In addition to that, this tool can also create extra blood flow that goes to the pelvic region. So if anybody has any issues with ED, this can also support with that. This is not to be inserted. This is for external use only. And you can get 20% off by going to butterwellness.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS. My favorite Honey Playbox sex toy has to be the Joy Thrust. What is so cool about this toy is that this part vibrates and thrusts, which stimulates the G-spot, and this end stimulates the clitoris. Their products cover a massive, wide variety of experiences and desires, and the majority of them are app-enabled. So in addition to the buttons on the toys, you can adjust the intensity of the toy on an app on your phone, which makes for really fun, spicy playtime. If you're curious about trying out app-enabled sex toys, go to honeyplaybox.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS, for 20% off of your entire order. If you are watching or listening to this, you're probably interested in sex and or kink and are curious about finding new partners to explore things with. However, it can be difficult to find those people. The thing I love about the HUD app is that it's more than just an app. They have a community, a podcast, and a ton of education. And inside of their app is a bedroom feature, so you can select all of the things you're interested in, all of the things you want to try, all of the things you don't want to try, and that can be shown to potential future partners. So to learn more, go to hudapp.com/sextalk. That is hudapp.com/sextalk, SEGGSTALK.
Penises, right? Without any of the ridges, without any of the discrepancy, and they go small, medium, and large.
Okay.
But what it's doing is it's fully opening those three sets of muscles, and it's keeping it open.
Right.
So let's say, okay, I'm ready to get into anal. I have a small, medium, and large, and I like the glass. And the key is you want to start with training the muscle first.
Yeah.
And it's all about muscle memory. Once your body knows, like, hey, this is, because the mechanism there is how do you poop?
What do you mean?
The mechanism that innately we all have is you know how to poop.
Yes.
Right? In theory, we all know how to poop. But what happens is that the muscles relax from inside out when we're pooping. But with sex, we're asking it to opposite, right? And so your body needs to learn the right ways to actually do that. So with a small, medium, and large glass, let's say the first 2 weeks are just the small toy.
Yeah.
You may even be in that group one where you're like, no, I can go bigger. It's like, no, I don't need you to.
Yeah.
And so give me 2 sets of 12, just like going to the gym 2 times a week. And I usually tell people, turn the shower on, you're by yourself, relax a little bit. I like silicone-based lube specifically for anal.
Okay.
Obviously with that, your sheets and all that stuff, that's why I usually do the first in the shower or near it, just because you want to get all that stuff and not stain and all this other issues. But silicone-based lube creates the best lubricity, specifically for thinner skin and muscle. With that said, it's literally I go in until I hit the first muscle, really well lubricated. I hold it there. 3, 2,
a phallic-like toy?
Well, the glass dilating kit, and I go in until I hit the muscle. And remember, there's 3 muscles. Right. So I engage the first muscle, hold it. 3, 2, 1, take it out. Relubricate. I go back in. Second time, you'll probably go to the first, maybe hit the second muscle. And you'll see that each time you're going in and out, you're engaging the muscle. You're not creating force. You're not pain. There's nothing like that. You may have a little discomfort in the beginning, and then what you'll do is you'll really start to be like, okay, that's muscle 1, that's muscle 2, and then you'll learn muscle 3. And then you'll see as you're doing it, once you're fully past 3, the toy will go all the way in. And then what you'll do is you'll, instead of coming out each time, you'll keep it in there, but move it 3 to 4 centimeters. So what you're doing is you're training the muscles to kind of get stronger. You're working them out. It's no different than you going to the gym and one day we're doing biceps, the next day we're doing triceps to stretch. Exactly. It's the same concept. People don't think of the pelvic floor and the ass like biceps and triceps, but we should, because it's exactly the same. And as you're doing that over 2 weeks, just the small toy, you're going to start to see that each time it gets easier. And each time you're able to relax and understand how to control the pelvic floor. Then after 2 weeks, if you're like, hey, I did it, I feel great, you'll always start with the small toy. It pre-dilates, it pre-lubricates, and then you'll go from the small into the medium for 2 weeks, slowly, gradually working, and then you'll repeat for small, medium into large. If you're in group 1, you should be small, small into medium, medium into large, and then you're off to the races, and we'll talk about the trusty cone next. Others, you'll start to kind of have like, well, does it work? Does it not? Where am I getting hiccuped on? Did I use enough lube? Was the situation appropriate? And it goes in the book of like all the different scenarios for you to think about. We just launched with this silicone-based cone. Now, it looks a little bit daunting, but it's not. But small, medium, and large, very, very similar. But
large is big.
Yeah, but the concept is how do we work the skin? So this is really great in concert. And you don't have to go all the way down. It just kind of depends on where you want to be sexually. But with that being said, when you use a silicone cone like this, what you're doing is you're keeping the external skin open always the most.
Right, which is the tightest
Exactly. And not only is it the tightest part, it's the first thing that people hit. And most people hit it without lube, and they're like, stick it in and shove it in. Exactly. But if you set the stage for success with using the glass and working with a cone, very similar from small, medium into large, what you're doing is you're training the muscles, you're strengthening the skin, and you're creating more elasticity so that you're able to. And then as you're doing it, you're what works, what doesn't, change positions from the back, from the front, you know, then you can start getting more adventurous to kind of on yourself explore and be like, all right, this hits the P spot, this hits the A spot, this hits me really much better. Great. How does that translate into better sex positions and or bringing toys or pegging or anything into play?
Okay, A and P spot. When I first squirted, I did a deep dive on all of this, and like it's hard to find even academic stuff on the A spot existing. Can you speak to the A spot and P spot?
So
I was like, does it even exist?
It does exist. But a lot of it is also translational pleasure, right? Or transference, where especially, so let's talk about P spot. So the P spot is where the prostate is. The prostate is the gland that secretes a lot of fluid that mixes with the sperm. But what it does is it creates that semen. So you have sperm, and then it mixes with the prostate juice, and then it becomes semen that then ejaculates. So the prostate juice helps to expand. It also has nutrients. It helps for the sperm to create. Exactly. And then also it helps travel, you know, the shoot, right? All that stuff. So it makes total sense. Now, the prostate gland is right where the anal cavity and the rectum are. They literally abut each other. So when you're entering someone's hole, you pass the third muscle, and then literally right above it is where the prostate is. And with that, men or people born with prostates can get so stimulated in that because direct pressure into that in a very controlled way, because it is a finicky gland and we can talk about it, but that's where it starts to stimulate and create that much more heightened orgasms. That is the same area that the A spot is.
Oh.
Now, the nerve endings, there's lots of difference between males, females, and all the like, but everyone's kind of really the same, right? And
we all start as
exactly.
female
exactly. And so with that being said, in that space, even though there's no prostate, there are positive nerve endings. And is it the positive nerve endings? Is it that you're stimulating the clitoris, the vagina, and the uterus and all of that in a different angle? All of that. But with that being said, again, same component. By engaging anally in the right ways, you can be completely tapping into a different orgasm, a much more heightened orgasm. And it should be on everybody's table.
Oh, you're saying the A spot is stimulated through the ass?
Yes.
For women?
Yes.
Okay, I think I was maybe thinking about something else. Basically, when I was researching it, there's a spot past the G spot for women.
So again, it really depends on where.
Spots.
Yeah, I think, but again, they're the same in theory, right?
But stimulated,
right? Like I'm the anal guy.
See what you're saying.
But yes, but you can hit it anterior, which is to the front. You can hit it through vaginal play, but you can hit it through. And sometimes there's even double ways that you can hit them from both sides. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. But again, that region is a stimulated region that just heightens people's experiences.
And I think it's so important for men that are nervous about putting something up there of the prostate can be stimulated externally.
Absolutely.
So like with one of my partners, it's more of like, well, let's use a vibrator. Let's use a toy more in the taint area to create the vibrations that stimulate it.
100%.
And that's mind-blowing for them too. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think it's whatever you feel comfortable with. Usually you find people where like you first start doing the external and then they're then they're like, oh, this feels really great. And then you're like, okay, can I lick? And let me go a little bit further. And then like it just starts to take on.
It's always a progression.
Exactly. Yeah. But with that, yes, you can definitely do external prostate work to get you into a good space as it relates to it. Because it's super powerful.
It's
for everybody. I mean, obviously the primary, but then like all the partners involved, it just creates a dynamic that just enhances sex.
Yeah. And I mean, I think speaking to generally straight men, like there is a lot of curiosity and there is a lot of shame, whether they work through it or not, through therapy or whatever, like there is this inherent societal shame of this makes me something, even if it's just, it makes me less masculine to put something up there. Not necessarily gay. There's just this thing for them, but there are other ways to experience that pleasure if that is the barrier for you. Also a pun, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But that was where, that was one of the reasons why with But Seriously, we started in the book of just that, which is like dispelling the myths, trying to get people so much societal, how you grew up, religious, backgrounds, all of these things play so much into it. Yes. And the reality is that many people will never engage anally for their entire life. And that's fine. But at the end of the day, if you're feeling curious as it relates to that, then how do you do it in a way that is a slow progression to tickle you in a good way, but also for you to feel as if take the anal out of it and look more from a pleasure perspective. And it's it's the what you don't know. It's the unknown that in many people, when you walk away from that and you say, I'm going to, everything's a yes, obviously in a consensual way, you're just going to heighten everything. It's not only in sex, in life. Think about how many things you learn by just saying, yes, I'll be there. I'll do it. I'll go. I'll try. Why not?
Yeah. And I think for many straight partners, I often hear, oh, we tried it once. It's kind of this, we tried it once thing. And I'm like, okay, so it wasn't really great for anybody involved, and that's because there's this force and there's this attitude of wanting to check it off the bucket list, which I understand as a kinky person. And also it's why I haven't done it yet, is because I don't want to just check it off the list.
Yeah. And even in the gay space, when you look at just thinking, how many first sexual experiences were good in anything? I mean, I think, and again, it becomes part of that shame also when it's not good right away. They're like, okay, it wasn't good for me. Like that
Probably won't be good again.
That's again. But the reality is that yes, setting the stage for success is so important, and the education, and for you to understand, look, sexual education in this world sucks.
Yes.
It's so lacking, and it's going to continue to lack for quite some time, especially for the people that I think need it.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at, how do people access this type of information? That was where my practice and the book and all this stuff was like, wait a second, let's just meet people where they are and start creating that curriculum so people are able to see that it's not just shove it in my hole and that's it. And then I have a bad experience and that's over. People fly from all over the world to see me because at the end of the day, it is important and it defines people.
Yeah.
And when you can't do that, it's catastrophic. And so the key for me was, how do you educate people so that they don't get to that point, right? If you understand from the beginning what you need to do to engage anally and explore self, at the first initial, it just sets the stage for success. And then when you have success, you're like, fuck, this feels really good. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you start implementing it in the correct way.
Right.
Whereas instead of having a one and done situation, you're missing out.
Yeah. And I mean, like we chatted about a little bit on our prep call, like this is tied to mental health for people.
Totally.
Like deeply. If, sexual insecurities, they're so real and they can take up a lot of space.
I usually say to people, I'm 60% functional work.
Yeah.
Making the ass tighter, making it bigger, making it looser, making the skin tougher like that. And then I'm 40% mental. And a lot of what we do with physical therapy and this test called anal manometry, where we measure the pressures in the ass to know group 1, group 2, group 3. We do a lot of work with anal Botox for that group 2 and 3 so that people lose the inhibition of that tightness, which then allows them to dilate better. It's just a rubber band. I always say, like you ever get those really thick rubber bands in the mail and you're like, fuck, I can't get it off the mailer or the whatever, the circular. If you stretch that day in and day out or a couple times a week, what's going to happen to that rubber band?
Right.
But that's where toy work. But if that doesn't work, by giving anal Botox, we take the reflex away. And now it allows you to stretch.
Yeah.
The best bottoms in the world, they bottom. And they're bottoming 2 to 3 times a week.
Whew.
If they're not, then they're using a toy once a week, every other week to keep it. It is a lose it or use it situation, or the other way, use it or lose it.
That was going to be one of my questions. After the 6-week protocol is done, is it like going to the gym where it's, okay, maybe I don't need to do it still that 2 times a week, but I need to maintain it?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you are. I see a lot of people that are into anal during birthdays, or special occasions.
Yes.
Those people get hurt more.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah, those people get hurt more. Right. Or these top verse people where they're not engaging anally all the time.
Okay.
And there's reasons for that. Most of the time it is painful. Or most of the time they're not able to fully relax.
The bottoms are practicing.
Exactly. And it's kind of, that use it or lose it situation where it's like, how do you set the stage for that success? Right. And if it is so defined from a time perspective, then leading up to it.
Yes.
Get yourself into a good situation. And that's where I talk a lot about using the toys in sex play. So let's say you've done the protocol, you're taking the small, medium, and large, you're into the cone, you feel confident.
Right.
Then the first time is like, okay, I'm going to bring the toys into sex play.
Absolutely.
I'm going to use them to pre-dilate, to pre-lubricate. I'm only going to sit on top.
And this is also what my ass has been used to for the last.
That's right. And then I'm
familiar subject.
That's right. And then I'm going to get my partner or partners or whomever to just be like, they're only there as a tool.
Yeah.
They're not fucking you. You're sitting on them. You're facing them. You're in control. And you're using their dick, their toy, their peg, whatever it is, to allow you to learn how to navigate. Because now it's like it's bringing someone else in and it's a different breed, literally,
more
right?
Guys.
Exactly. And then once you start getting into the good groove over a couple of sessions, then it's like, okay, how do we start changing positions? And in the book, we put like 1 peach, 2 peaches, and 3 peaches because people don't know that like certain positions are definitely much more riskier, right? If you're not facing the partner, if you're behind, if they're lifting you up, if it's like one person's on a bed and the other person is standing, well, what's the height? What's the height of you? How's your pelvis? What's the angle? So you can see that like it's not rocket science, but I think by you navigating by yourself for the first while, you're able to kind of set the stage to be like, oh, if I move my pelvis this way or I go this way, I feel better. It sets the stage for success. People just don't think that way. And this translates to vaginal sex, to oral sex, to every type of sex, you know? It's just a matter of kind of putting the pieces together so that now, and then I don't want it, and this is for the listeners, like people are like, oh, this is just so much fucking work. You know, I don't want it to be that. You know, you want to kind of like bring it into your world and tickle it through to your level.
Or like have a toy and some lube in the shower. And like set yourself up for success.
That's right.
Fucking toothbrush in the shower.
That's right. Exactly. And then it will be a little medical, a little bit clinical in the beginning. But then, but then once you start setting that stage, then what happens is it becomes innate, right? And then sex just becomes that much better because you're not thinking about it, but your body's actually doing it.
Well, and I feel like when people just jump into doing anal or end up being this people that tried it once, they're not having a positive association with it.
Yes.
It's a thing that they tried once. And I think for many people, it's a fear of like, did I just shit on that person? And it's like, because the sensation is so oftentimes the first time they fucking felt that. And the first time I put something up there and then took it out, I was like, you know, what happened? And so, I mean, all genders experience a lot of in their head stuff during sex. And so I think that that's just why there are so many kind of negative connotations with those people that have tried it once or twice, is because they're really worried about poop and about their partner's
Are you going to
poop.
shit on your partner? So a couple of things with that. I think one thing to think of is don't use the toys and douche beforehand. A lot of people want to clean out before they're doing the self-exploration with the glass toys. And I don't want you to, because I want you to see that 8 out of 10 times you're going exactly. And you're going to be clean 8 out of 10 times. That's why we went with the clear glass too with the Future Method, because I want people to take it out and show yourself. Be like, oh, fuck, I am actually clean. I always speak first of gut health before butt health. So how do you make sure you're pooping like a dog? You know, my dog, his name is Oreo.
Depends on the dog.
And he goes outside, and when he does, he doesn't need to wipe. It's all congealed. It's like the perfect poop. And so the key is, well, why is that? It's diet, right? It's appropriate fiber. It's appropriate Western versus Eastern dieting. You have to think of that. And the key component here is by adding appropriate fiber into your diet, whether it's through specific foods, whether it's through proteins and bulking, or through supplements, and adding pre and probiotics. What you're doing is you're setting the stage for that dog shit, right? Where now you go to the bathroom and it's clean. Remember, solid and consistent, but you want it soft. You don't want it too hard where you're having an issue. So exactly. So a lot of water. And with that being said, if you think of the mechanism of pooping, let's talk about that. There's what's called the sigmoid colon, which then goes into the rectum, which then goes into the anal canal, which then goes out your ass.
All right.
So I'm sleeping. It's 6 o'clock. I wake up in the morning. When you stand up, the reason why most people poop in the morning is because when you stand up, you're changing the pelvic angle. And what happens? That poop moves from the sigmoid colon into the rectum. Then you're brushing your teeth. You're like, oh, I feel like I need to go poop. And then
one sip of coffee.
Exactly. Or some people, the cigarette thing. And then what happens is the poop moves to touch that third sphincter, that internal muscle.
And that's why it's so tight, is it's hanging out.
Exactly. And then it hits it. And now that muscle relaxes. But you're not at the bathroom yet to poop. So you're holding those other two muscles to now keep it until you're ready to go. Then you sit on the bowl, relax those other two muscles, and then you poop. So the mechanism is when you empty and you finish, the rectum, where penis, where toys, where things, is clean. People don't believe that.
And before it lies the third.
Correct. Right? The other sphincter that's there, right? Some people call that as the second hole, but there's a third sphincter higher up in where that sigmoid colon is. So Where people have issues is if they have irritable bowel, or I got a meeting, I need to shit, and I only get 60% out, but that's enough, and then I'm able to leave, right? What happens is there's remnant in there. You feel like you got to go, you didn't get it fully out. That's where we're talking about the fiber and the gut health.
Sure.
Because if we get you into a good groove, you should be clean. And I started a douching company, right? Future Method, the first thing was, how do we, and why did we start it? Because water or enemas or shower hoses fucks with the microbiome. What happens if the microbiome
Stuff's
changes?
Not supposed to just,
Exactly. So what happens with it is higher risk of incidence of STDs, higher risk of HIV, higher risk of drying and mucus production and tearing just from regular douching.
Okay.
And so I said, well, wait a second. If we know that people are douching, even no matter what I say, you're going to douche. I get it. Why can't we just come up with something? That's right. Why can't we just come up with something that's not toxic?
Yeah.
And so we did. And we said, okay, so we've come up with these powder packs and this liquid solution that you literally take the powder pack, you put 4 ounces of water, whatever water that you would drink.
Right.
If you're in a place that's non-drinkable water, then buy some.
Right.
But for every 4 ounces, you put a powder pack. And it's kind of like Crystal Light and
totally
those stuff.
Like the electrolyte.
And then what you do is you mix it up. But what it does is it neutralizes. It makes it pH balanced. It makes it isotonic, isoosmolar, which are terms that makes it so that it doesn't fuck with the microbiome.
Right.
It cleans you, it leaves you silky and sexy, but it doesn't muck with the environment.
Okay.
If I go on the street, this is Canal Street, if you and I go on Canal Street and we swab 20 if we swab 20 random people on the street, their ass, I could tell you who has anal sex. Because there is this microbiome change, which what's called Provotella, which is a species that overgrows and then bad things happen.
Wow.
And so the key is,
overgrows only if douching? Or
anal sex, because a lot of water-based lubes are the same as using water. They're not in the right zone.
Interesting.
So, and you can see it obviously in vaginal sex. A lot of people have problems with the pH changes, right? Yeah. Whether it's fungal infections, yeast, all those things.
Girly.
Yeah, right. A lot of that is the products that are an issue, from the lubes that you're using. Even some people are douching vaginally, all of those things. And so there's not that much difference to it. But what it does is it allows you to kind of understand and be like, okay, first of all, do I need to douche? Prove to yourself that you can douche a lot less, or if at all.
It can feel kind of addictive.
That's right.
Like when you have the experience of the cleanliness or whatever.
Totally. Like, a lot of people love the colonic stuff.
Right.
But the story that I get a lot is like, oh, I douched twice. I feel really clean. But you know what? I'm just going to do one more time.
Oh my God.
And then they do it a third time, and then it's dirty again. Well, because it went higher. It went into that sigmoid colon. And then it elicited a bowel movement. So what you wouldn't have. So you just want to keep it in the range of where the dick, the toy is going.
Right.
You know, you're putting in, you're putting out. That's why our bulbs are even much smaller from Future Method on purpose.
Stuff is needed.
Because I want you to titrate it down. I want you to say, if I'm doing appropriate dieting, if I'm eating correctly, if I'm doing the fiber, can I go to 4 rinses, 3 rinses, 2 rinses, and use the toys to show you. A lot of people will do the toys after they're douching too.
Sure.
Because,
a
check.
Of course.
It pre-lubricates. It gets rid of any extra liquid because sometimes it gets stuck in the nook and cranny. Yeah. But it'll also show you that you're super clean.
Yep.
And so I want people to understand less is always more. We're already creating trauma just from the sexual act. How do we start to analyze the before, the during, the after? Yep. Exactly. And make sure that we're doing things appropriately.
I was recently giving a blowjob to a partner, and one of the things that I love incorporating into all types of play is lube. But specifically with blowjobs, I love being able to use this honeydew flavor of mochi melt because it makes it so much more fun and delicious for both parties. I also enjoy using it for penetrative sex, and in the past, I found that I can't really use flavored lube down there because it could upset my pH. However, mochi melt is pH balanced, it is food grade, and it is FDA approved, which makes it completely safe for use down there for the ladies and the fellas. If you want to try out Mochi Melt, go to mochimelt.com and use code Thea, THEA, for 15% off of your entire order. Mommy Thea recently created a profile on sensually.com, which is a sex-positive platform for people to both provide and seek out sex-positive and sensual experiences, which can take place both online and in person. They have a wide variety of creators on their platform, ranging from BDSM experts to sex coaches to escorts to erotic artists. They have it all. It is completely free to sign up, whether you want to create an account or seek out experiences. You can learn more by going to sensually.com. That is sensuali.com. I recently squirted for the first time, and it was a lot of fluid. I was surprised. I squirted like 5 times in a row the first time I did it, and everything was drenched. I spent the entire next day doing multiple loads of laundry, and as excited as I was to have squirted for the first time, I also realized that I needed a solution for the problem at hand. So I am so excited to be working with Splash Blanket. They create incredible waterproof blankets. They can be used for squirting, for sex in general. They absorb up to 1 liter of liquid. I mean, I just use mine as a cozy blanket. They are extremely diverse, and I absolutely love them. So go to splashblanket.us and use code SEGGS, SEGGS, for 15% off of your entire order.
Yeah. And I think the focus on douching speaks to the fear of poop and bodily fluids and things, that I also hope there can be a shift in the normalcy and the narrative there.
Totally. The shame of, am I going to shit? And be like, the tops. And in the book, we talk a lot about top tips.
Okay,
like,
great.
How do you be a good top?
Yeah.
And one of them is not shaming, that things are going to happen. And like, you may be wanting to squirt, but maybe the person that you're with doesn't want that.
Right.
And it happens, and you're like, it's cool. Don't worry. I mean, we're able to move forward with that. I think the key is to set the stage for things happen, even tearing, hemorrhoids. Everyone is going to have these issues. Right. It's just at some point, even if you don't take it up the ass, just from pooping and traveling and living. And so how do we normalize the conversation so that it's part of everybody's vernaculum?
Right.
Where if it happens, everybody understands what to do, and there's no shame or stigma associated with it. Shit does happen.
You're saying that what percentage of people aren't using condoms? 80 or
about 80%. Yes, so between 70 to 80% of most gay men don't use condoms anally. And that's because the shift, PrEP is an anti-HIV. Yes. We're doing a lot of DoxyPep, which is post-exposure for decreasing STDs. And that is a super amazing shift. Yeah. And such has been a whirlwind. I've been doing that forever. Now it's like tons of companies are doing that, which I think is great. Because at the end of the day, what is the components that lead to STIs? Is it the douching? Is it the improper lube? Is it the lube that you're using? Is it, is it that we're not doing condoms? Like, what are all of these components? And I think it's so multifactorial. Right. Where I'm a risk.
Not just always use condoms.
Yeah. And I'm a risk reduction guy, which is like, no judgment, no stigma. What are you doing and how are you engaging? Do I want you to use condoms? Yeah. But the reality is like, it feels better without it. And I understand.
Thank you for saying that.
And I understand why.
Right.
And at the end of the day, there's some people that you may, there's some people that you don't. You may be someone that doesn't want to at all. And it's totally cool.
Yeah.
I think the key is, again, is like, I see people not using condoms and the tops are getting infections in their penis, right? Irritation.
With bacteria.
And with bacteria. That's where the DoxyPep after makes sense. Sometimes we even do like specific antibacterial creams that we say, okay, after you're bottoming, boom, let's do that.
Sure.
Some people come to me like, Evan, I love licking ass, but I constantly get diarrhea from that.
Whoa.
Well, so we put those people on similar to a DoxyPep, which is doxycycline, 2 pills, 1 time.
Okay.
We put people on Flagyl, which is like an antiparasitic, an antibacterial. So there's so many things that we can do, but you need to feel comfortable, and or we as practitioners need to create a space where we're able to talk about it, because it's like one life, one ass, one sexual pleasure, where it's like you should be able to do what you want. And it's all about risk. I remember speaking to a condom company that we collaborate with, and I was like, we have to step outside of it being like, oh, condoms are the end all.
That feels like a very prevalent narrative.
Yeah, it's like, it's so antiquated. It's like, yes, condoms are part.
I often use condoms.
Yes, they are definitely.
And sometimes.
That's right. And they're part of it.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, okay, there's so many other things that people are using and or doing.
Yes.
And how do we just make sure that we're appropriately looking at the risk? And if the individual understands what that risk is,
right,
and they are accepting that, great. Like, fuck it, awesome. Go do your thing. And then if something happens, I'm here. Like however I can help to support you to do that act.
Yeah. And I feel like there are a lot of just these like little common reactions to things that help or that don't help. They press things down.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I feel like the narrative for women is to be on birth control and to use protection. And for me, I'm not on birth control. It destroys my mental health. And I'm very in touch with my cycle. But like, if I tell a friend that I didn't use a condom and I'm not on birth control, it's like
yes.
Oh my God, it's this whole thing. And I'm like, I have not been pregnant yet. And it's, I just think the reactions that people elicit are often like kind of keep me from telling people that I'm not on birth control and sometimes have unprotected sex.
Totally. I think that the key though is to continue talking about it and then to be like, well, what are you doing? And and again, knowing like, well, what if, right? And also taking the scenarios down, like if I am engaging in anal sex, do I have a practitioner, one that I feel comfortable talking to? Do I have someone that I can go to if something goes wrong? And a lot of that is even in my space, right? Mm-hmm. Of like as a physician and a surgeon, I have other surgeons that I reach out to if I see something that's like different or like things aren't healing the way that I want to. And you reach out because at the end of the day, you need to have resources.
Yeah.
And again, the same thing of like, if you're not using condoms and you're not, well, what type of cycling do you do? Do you do a pull-out method? Do you do other things to mitigate that? And what works for you may not work for others, but it may work for others. And talking about it allows people, to be like, hey, this is working for me and setting the stage for that success. So the more you keep doing it, the more the world will shift.
And, I mean, it's wild times we're in with like, I live in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And I had unprotected sex like a month ago and it was not super high risk, but I was still like, well, I could not get an abortion.
Yeah.
And so I am going to take a plan B, which I hadn't taken in like a decade.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those little like, whoa moments.
Yeah.
What I do have available to me.
Yeah. And I think that again, it's like looking at where you live, what access do you have?
Yeah.
What is, just like go to CVS, Dwayne Reed or whatever, the sex shop and just like walk the aisles and like see everything, right?
Yes.
What lubes, what douches. I'm giving a talk soon on from a retail perspective.
Yeah.
How do we hold the retailers somewhat accountable for choosing the right stuff to stock?
They're not educated.
Which is right.
Random buyers,
exactly. And to try to just say, okay, but again, my goal is to educate you, the listener, to go down there and be like, okay, if I were, where is the plan B? What can I do? What are the things that I can, and then like, again, not just be like, oh, fuck. And then like at that point, reading, right?
Crisis.
Yeah. Like the crisis mode we know doesn't work. And so the key is, again, is setting that stage for success. It's not easy. But it really should be standard. It should be, we know, in all schools. It should be second nature of everybody having access to this. But the world is so fucked up. That's why you should take it up the ass.
Great soundbite so far. I would love to hear, so I'm very passionate about PrEP because I have played with a good amount of like bi men on field and heteroflexible men. And what I have found is that especially heteroflexible men that are just dipping their toe in male play, they've never fucking heard of it.
Yeah.
And so I try to talk about it a lot. I've also done a lot of educating on field and then unmatching. Like, I'm actually not necessarily comfortable having sex if you've never heard of PrEP or considered it.
Yeah.
You are also having sex with men. So I would love a little more education on that. And then either before or after, I'd love just like a little history of like men and gay sex and AIDS and all of the things.
Yeah.
And where we're at now.
I think, from a PrEP perspective, it's a game changer for the space, right? My generation and maybe a little bit more above me is the first ever outliving gay engagements that engaging anally, right?
Yeah.
Just because everybody else died. And a lot of that was the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And now when you look at pills and or injectables, so first off, if you're HIV positive and undetectable, it's such amazing because you're no different than anybody else and you're not going to transmit and or give. So that's super amazing.
Yes.
Second is from a PrEP perspective, it's a pill and or an injectable that people take. There's many different modalities depending upon what type of sex and where and what you're engaging. Okay. Some people do a daily pill or the injection that's for, every other month.
Oh.
Others.
Are there any downsides to that?
So it just kind of depends on you, your habits, and where and what.
That just seems way easier.
Yeah, but some people don't trust it. It's so interesting. People know that if they take the pill, that at least
it feels
daily. And then if it's injectable every couple of months, what about the day before the injectable? Is it still efficacious?
The week up to.
So there's lots of, you have to just figure out how it works in your world. No, obviously there's a grace period as it relates to it, but
same as birth control,
same thing.
IUD.
That's right. But again, it's people's fears and people can, and
makes you feel better.
That's right.
Just take it.
And some people do what's called a 2-1-1 approach, which is I'm not engaging anally and or in this higher risk behavior, but this weekend I am.
Oh.
And so they are able to take 2 pills the day of the engagement before the engagement. And then they do 1 and 1 after. So it's called 2-1-1 dosing.
DoxyPep after or just the PrEP?
So it would be, it depends on what you want. So some people are just from an anti-HIV and they'll do just the PrEP. Some people are doing both. Both is definitely, on the table for sure, especially in higher risk situations. Wow. I tell people, it depends on who you're engaging with, right?
Yes.
If it's someone that you've been getting STDs from these people and then DoxyPep and PrEP are important.
Yeah.
If it's like, hey, we've never, and everyone's getting tested and we're all in a great space and you feel comfortable with that, great. I mean, it just depends on the comfort level. But PrEP in and of itself is a game changer.
What's the reduction, the percentage?
So we're up in the high 90s as it relates to that. Again, you're looking at, there are definitely some failures in that. When you look at that, it's people missing the pills and not taking it and not staying on top, all of those components with that. But you're talking about if you are on HIV meds and completely controlled correctly, your partner, and you're on PrEP, you're at 0% in terms of getting the HIV component. Now we're starting to see stem cell treatment on HIV positive men, convert them, which is really cool, to not having HIV. So I think in our lifetime, we're going to see, hopefully.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing a lot more heterosexual people develop HIV. And again, I think it's just because people think that PrEP is only for anal engagement, specifically gay men.
Yes.
They don't understand that everybody's hooking up with everybody and that HIV can be transmitted vaginally and or orally and in other capacities. And so by understanding that, I think it's super important. I also think it's super important, people that are, leaving high school and going to college, and you are going to engage with multiple people and trust no one.
Right.
Right. It's that's what the reality is you can't trust anybody. Right. And the reality is to set the stage for success. Mm-hmm. What are the things that we should make sure people have, from the HPV vaccine to appropriate STD screening, to PrEP, DoxyPep, to understanding all of these things? Yeah. I think it should be, a complete evaluation of where you want to go to mitigate that risk. Because even though HIV is definitely less stigmatized, there's still a lot, still real. Yeah. And if there's ways to avoid it, I think most people would choose that. It's just, how do you have access to that care? How do you make sure that you're able to get it? And it's super readily available. There's so many places to get it, whether you're local places and or now mail order and many other ways to set the stage for that to be a part of your world.
I think it can feel overwhelming to understand where to find all of this stuff, even though it could only be a couple of Googles away. Like I was saying, with the people I'm encountering, the men who are exploring with other men and at a higher risk, I think there's so much shame and closetedness to that they don't even want to do the research. And, I wish our sex education system would get their shit
but
together
seriously,
a little bit.
right?
Yeah.
But seriously.
You talk about it in the beginning of the book, but it's like, I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
No. And I think one of the things is that I would love, like, even when you're looking at the bi-curious and bringing the anal play, right? Or bringing with other men, right? Men to men.
Yes.
If we normalize it in the hetero side of just regular vaginal penetration, right? It translates to that, to much more empowerment globally. And what I mean by that is when I first started this, we were talking about gay, anal sex and whatnot. And I found that the best publications to talk about it were women-centered publications, Vogue, Cosmo, Women's Health. Why? Because first of all, women talk about sexual issues a lot more than men.
Yeah.
Women are much more attuned to investigate on right, wrong, indifferent.
Sure.
And so a lot of the pivot for us was to be like, well, wait a second. If I normalize the conversation first with women,
love this,
then it'll translate to hetero men, men that are engaging with other men in hetero relationships and or just run-of-the-mill homosexual. And or we're seeing a lot more fluidity with everybody and not really labeling, which I think is amazing because it goes back to just the way we started, which is to say pleasure.
Yeah.
And your attraction changes so many times in life from one to the other to both to many different and why shouldn't it?
Right.
But with that being said, it's interesting. Mainstream media is still hetero and women centered. And yes, I want it to change, but I think this is why this is so important to push this, because if we're pushing it where women are now saying, well, wait a second, PrEP is important. Are you on PrEP? Yes. Now it starts to change the narratives where we're able to be like, okay, and then like, oh yeah, I get STD screening. Like, no, well, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I get a blood test. And you're like, no, you need to get a piss test. And we need to make sure because there are so many people that just get routine bloods and they're like, oh, I'm good. But yet
good
locally.
With gonorrhea and chlamydia.
Exactly. But the reality is that when you look at, I see so many people that get blood tests.
Okay.
That even for gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it needs to be swabbed and or urine checked. So for instance, let's say someone comes in like, I'm into anal. I need to do STD screening. First off, we're doing an oral swab for chlamydia and gonorrhea. We're doing an anal swab for chlamydia and gonorrhea, though I also want to normalize herpes because I see tons of it. So you should do that. Obviously, from a vaginal perspective, same swab from a male that is,
I don't think I've ever gotten that.
Or from a person bearing prostate.
Yeah,
urine check is so important. You probably do urine. I'm assuming.
Yes.
And again, the question is like, is urine going to capture fully the gonorrhea, chlamydia, any vaginal infections? These are things that we need to kind of, because the reality is, so when someone comes to my office, gay, takes it up the ass, and we're like, okay, oral swab, anal swab, urine check.
No need for blood.
And blood.
Oh,
and the blood is mostly for syphilis.
Okay.
Just because that's the only test that we can do. But everything else, there are so many people that just do blood. Yes. And they're going around chlamydia infection, completely asymptomatic. That's where DoxyPep is a game changer, because think of people that are engaging with multiple partners, sex parties, and they're asymptomatic. Yeah. Now exponentially it spreads versus if that person were to just take one dose of DoxyPep.
People know that things can be asymptomatic,
totally,
especially with herpes.
Totally,
I have multiple guests on that have HSV 1 and 2, and it's like the comments I get are just like, "Didn't they see the cold sores, the herpes? They didn't." And it's just
no, you don't need that, and especially herpes type 1.
Yeah,
it's so interesting. I don't think I see more herpes type 1 genitally than I do herpes type 2. And the reality is, and even though the nomenclature is herpes type 2 is genital, it's bullshit. No, because the reality is that we lick, we suck, we play, we have so much fun.
Everything is everywhere.
Everywhere is everywhere. And I see so much, even from wet wipes, we speak a lot. People love wet wipes. People hate me because I'm like, get the fuck rid of wet wipes.
Are they spreading STIs?
Yes. More of they cause the STIs in you, meaning I see so many people come to me with herpes outbreaks or anal warts or genital warts, vaginal warts from HPV from The wet wipes.
How?
Because it changes the microbiome. Because what happens is you literally stop the wet wipes and they go away. And so what winds up happening is that, and I don't know what it is. Is it the fabric? Is it the actual solution?
Right.
Or is it that when people are doing it, they don't dry themselves enough and there's already too much moisture? But what happens is there's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria, but they're in equilibrium. When you use douching,
I was just going to say,
same as you. When you're using wipes, when you're setting the stage, even on a bidet, I'm a huge bidet fan. Okay. But the thing is, you got to make sure you dry yourself because at the end of the day, that even when people moisturize their holes, right? You need to not just pull up your underwear. Be naked. Let it breathe. Okay. Before you put your underwear on, wipe your ass and with your hand and be like, oh, it's dry. Because at the end of the day, we sweat, we poop, we go to the gym, we're in the pool and ocean, and moisture, from a vaginal perspective, can set the stage for things having a problem. Yes. And wet wipes, not only are they terrible for the environment and your plumbing, but they cause it. But I get it. I understand why you want to use it.
It's clean.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, well, you use them on babies. Well, the reality is that many babies have reactions to it because you see a lot of the parents, they wipe after they're having a meal and they wipe with a baby wipe their face. Whoa. And you see that they're red marks, they're a little bit blotchy. It's all from that. And babies, the skin and the architecture, it changes. So many finish using baby wipes when they're 2-3 years old. They're not continuing to use it. And there's a reason why, because it causes a lot of issues. So you just have to be careful with it. It's not the one-off here and there, though I've definitely seen people like one-off. Like if I use a baby wipe one time, I'm like a baboon's ass and I'm red and irritated. Wow. But many people, if you're using it one here, it's more the regular.
Yes.
And then that your body starts to develop and it changes into a space. So now you think of like, I'm using wet wipes, I'm douching, I'm using water-based lube, I'm changing the microbiomes. You could start to see it's like, we got to change the practices.
And so is like washcloth and water, we're good?
So I'm a huge fan of soap and water. I think soap and water, people don't want that. You got to like whatever soap you're using for your body.
But not body wash. Body wash can fuck up.
So it really depends on you, right? I think the key for me is, so in Future Method, we came up with a button body scrub specifically for anal. And the reason one was the microbiome component, but two was a lot of people have trouble getting the lube off, especially silicone-based lube and excrement. So it's like has two beads in it, one larger, one smaller, so that you're able to get the silicone-based lube and excrement off easily. Wow. But then the smaller replenishes, it nourishes, it sets the stage for success.
Yeah.
We wipe, people are using wipes incorrectly, they're douching, they're having sex. So the skin and the local area can be irritated.
Definitely.
And so that's where it's like, how do you set the stage for success? I like nighttime showering. People poop, they wipe, they sweat, and then they just get into bed. And I know it's kind of like how you were growing up. It just depends on what your parents taught you. But nighttime shower is like really an important thing because it sets the stage for everything to be successful, right? Yes. But you got to make sure you dry. Like I hair blow under my arms, under my ass, my balls, because I'm hairy. And like the reality is that it brings in moisture.
We need more of this.
So the thing is that by drying it, then I moisturize, just like I would use Neutrogena or we even have a soothing cream with Future Method. Cool. But you want to make sure, and that was the impetus when we made it, was like, how do we get something to dry super quickly? Right. Because most people won't listen to me. And they'll be like, oh yeah, just pull up my underwear and go do my thing. So you even sleeping naked, making sure in summertime that you're letting things breathe. If you're on the beach, and you go in the water, change to a new bathing suit. Don't sit with moisture, right? Okay. Same component. Like if you're using covers like big covers to go to sleep at night. You know, in the summer, don't. It should be a top sheet or a lighter blanket. Why? Because that area is where the sun doesn't shine. It doesn't breathe. You need it to, and you need that hygiene in that space. Wow. You will thank me. Less wiping, less irritation. Yes. Your ass is great. It smells good. It's appropriate, and it's setting the stage for your success.
And, you know, I mean, I have a more addictive personality than many probably, but but all of those things to me are things that become very habitual and repetitive, the wipes and the douching specifically.
Totally.
So being aware of like how quickly that became something you do every day or regularly, I think is important. Yeah.
And I think it's just, again, I'm all for you doing you, like totally, but try to do less of it. Meaning, just titrate things down, because at the end of the day, more is not better, and more incorrectly just creates many issues as it relates to it. And the key is, if you know early on the right ways to engage and kind of set the stage for success, it just will allow you to enter the space and stay in the space and feel comfortable in the space and allow you to get to where you want to be. Because it's also not only you, right? It's your partners and how that plays into it. And many people can't get off anally just because of the location and their pelvic floor, but they're getting off because their partner's getting off, and it still is a pleasurable experience, right? Yeah. We spoke a little bit about the prostate being finicky.
Yes.
The gland is very thin-walled.
Okay.
And it's basically like a walnut.
Discomfort sometimes.
Correct. And sometimes a lot of people anally, like let's say you're getting fucked and like you don't come. And then they're like, oh, okay, like just go on with your day. But no, if you have a prostate, what happens is you've anally caused the gland to swell. And you need to release that because there's a thing called prostatitis, which the prostate can get quite irritated. People can pee too much. Sometimes the cum is a little bit different color, or there could be some bleeding in there. Sometimes your pelvis floor, you actually feel so tight. And so, and this can happen not only from run-of-the-mill, like it doesn't need to be anal sex, but the prostate. A lot of people love to edge.
I was just going to say.
Edging is really fun, but you have to get off. And sometimes when you're edging, you're causing the prostate to get too swollen. And so what happens is reflexively, it can be an issue. So if you've ever been like, oh, I feel
orgasm control with partners.
And so you just got to be careful.
Sure.
Where there are some people that are really good and could go for a really long time, but one, they need to get off with your session, or if they don't want to when they get home, because you need to empty that gland.
Well, I love this coming from you, because women hear from a lot of guys the whole like, I don't want blue balls.
Yeah.
But it's not a medical definition.
No,
you know what I mean? It's just like they want to come.
Yeah. Yeah,
this is important,
and they need to come, and so and it could be like, hey, go, you do your thing and jerk off and come on yourself, or me and my face, whatever.
Right.
But you should expel that, because if not, it's a pump.
Does it increase the risk of prostate cancer?
It can, for sure. And there's lots of issues where it increases the risk of prostatitis, acute and chronic, which then leads people to potential of the cancer component.
Yeah.
So again, like simple things that I think are simple, but yet nobody talks about, you know, which is like, so most people want to come like 2 or 3 times a week, because even if you're coming a lot, that can cause it in some people to come too much, where the gland just starts to get irritated with it.
Wow.
And so you have to kind of learn about it, and then also start to say, oh, this works, this doesn't, and kind of set the stage for that success.
Yeah.
Even though I say sex is simple, clearly you're seeing
don't feel
there's lots of issues and things. But again, you're right. It becomes habitual, where over time you don't even think about it. You just think about the pleasure.
Yes.
And anal for everybody.
Day, like, why we're both here having this conversation is because we want it to be fun and enjoyable.
Yes.
And shame-free for people.
That's right.
This shit is supposed to be fun.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, what else do I want to talk about? So, yeah, I would love to hear a bit more about, I mean, if you're comfortable sharing about any part of your own coming out journey, or just like what you've experienced in the last decade with, I feel like, other generations being very fluid in their sexuality. I think we're, while our country feels like it's pushing against this and creating more shame, I do feel like especially Gen Z is very progressive and very sexual in that way.
100%. I mean, I think for me, I went into a completely homophobic field, what we see a lot with athletes and what we're seeing with surgery. Back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I started this, it was like total bro culture.
The medical field.
Yes. I mean, 100%, especially being a surgeon, this like masculinity and like, you're there to save the day and like all this other, and especially in the cardiac space.
Interesting.
And then, so with that being said, it basically forced me into a relationship, with a woman. But with that being said, I was always kind of like, I could go both ways, and I still can. I always was kind of much more fluid of like, I fall in love with the person, and it was much needed at that time for both of us to be together. Though clearly, for me, I finally realized that the penis and the man behind the penis was that much more important to me.
Right.
And that was when I met Andy and kind of created that world. Yeah. But with that being said, I've had relationships on and off for years. Some were not sexual, but were definitely along the lines of a full relationship with another man, a boy at the time when I was 15, 16, 18. But I was never given the, it's okay, Evan, go forward.
Not that long ago, there was no representation.
Yeah. I was never given the, my uncle passed away of HIV AIDS when I was really young.
Oh,
and I remember going to that funeral. And for me, I was like, oh my God, like, how beautiful is this that like same sex and people were kissing and hugging and crying and being, and from my family, it was like, just not talked about. It was kind of like they're over there, we're over here. And there I am internally,
and
like
they died.
Yeah. And there I am internally being like, oh my God, but isn't this so beautiful that this can actually exist?
Yeah.
But that was why I left my town and I went to New York and I started to assimilate and see that like this, and that's why people are constantly leaving places where you don't feel as if you're represented, to know that there are places of that. But when I finally came to being, it was actually Andy, my partner, that outed me. And I was 30 years old, and it was just like,
you out yourself to you, or what do you?
Everything, basically. It was a lot more than what we could talk about now. But with that being said, he was like, look, you could either go back into your straightish world and try to be happy and live yourself that way, or you can come out and be gay and be Evan and be it by yourself, or you can come out and be with me. And I chose that, and it was the best move that I made, because at that point it was kind of allowing me to truly be. I wanted to be in a relationship, but I wanted to be in a same-sex one, and I still wanted to have kids and create this dynamic, but it was only the timing was perfect because it was the right time in the world to accept that, for me, and also for the world to accept that, 2 kids later, living in a place that's mostly straight people, but accepting and so a lot of that is, a crazy story. And there's a lot more in the book of like me navigating my own exploration.
Yeah.
But now I'm in such a great space, and especially giving back to the community and being able to talk about what I went through and where we should create the support for people in whatever journey. And it may change, especially with the fluid people. Sometimes it's like, no, I'm here. And then it's like, oh, but can you come over and fuck me? And then you're like, okay. And then you go there, and then you're like, it just winds up being where everything should be on the table. And I think a lot of what you're seeing is that, which is so cool.
It is. It is. I mean, I'm a millennial, and I'm seeing a huge difference with Gen Z and gender expression and sexual identity. And I feel like the more bisexual, curious, hetero, flexible men I'm connecting with on these apps, they're the millennials, the ones where there's a lot of secrecy or closetedness with themselves still, versus Gen Z is just like, doing their thing.
Totally.
Get it, guys.
And I think that's where you look at like popular press and popular culture.
Yes.
Like, you know,
the icons.
That's
the
right.
Celebrities.
That's right. And a lot of the celebrities and the singers are writing about it and talking about it.
Yes.
And then you start to see from when Lil Nas X and Troye Sivan and all of these up and coming amazing, you know, Omar and all these other players in it, Charlie, all these people.
About Lil Nas. That was awesome.
You know, I mean, all these now all of a sudden you have that much more mass power. You know, back in the day, you didn't have access to that. So now it's like literally at people's fingertips 24/7. The question is, how do we make sure that it's the right information that people are talking about?
Right.
Everybody can call themselves a sex therapist and be in the space, but how do we kind of create those curriculums so that it's standardized? How do you make sure you have trusted people to educate you and for you to set the stage for that success? So there's positives and then there's negatives with it. But I think the key is the fluidity side, which is, you know, thinking in that line just sets the stage for success for everybody, for all comers, literally.
Yay. And I mean, I just, you know, I really appreciate what you're doing in the space because, I mean, I have faced my own medical issues throughout my life, and I just don't feel safe in a lot of medical dynamics because oftentimes it's the first time you're meeting somebody and you're sharing really vulnerable stuff with someone about your body, which we are not taught how to talk about. And so the work you're doing is really, really important. And I hope it inspires other people to get into this line of work, specialty. Because I mean, I can't imagine some of the stories you've encountered of people who have been hiding things for years or in pain for years. Or never had anal and wanted to. I mean, I can't imagine.
And then, you know, I see people second, third, fourth opinions from all over the world where they've had terrible experiences. And it has pushed off the easy 10-minute procedure that I do in the operating room to set the stage. And, you know, like we were saying before, those 3 buckets of 1, 2, and 3. Bucket 3, a lot of times I do need to do surgery, and the surgery is not a huge deal. And in 6 weeks, we're then able to do toys and stretch and get into sex. And so before it wasn't even on the table. Now it's like, and then the problem is that a lot of practitioners that are delivering care only look at it as a shitting organ, where we start to say, where there's lots, and it should be part of the questions to be like, do you engage anally? What type of sex do you have?
What's going on
you know,
there?
How do we make sure that like my surgery is going to allow you to do that? And like, and I say all the time, even to people that never engaged anally, do you want to? We're going to do toy work just to get the scarring to heal correctly. But are you okay?
Imagine getting those questions.
You know,
when I go to like gynecology, that kind of stuff, it's like, do you have sex with men and women? How many people have you had sex with?
Totally. I know. And that's it. And you're just like, well, wait a second. And, you know, there's so many more to that. But practitioners are also failing that because they don't also want to feel uncomfortable asking the wrong question. But I say, exactly. And in the book, I go over for practitioners too, also like, what are the questions that I ask during my visit? And also, like, if you're seeing a practitioner and they're not asking you that, then you can say to them, but hold on a second, like, can we go over this, this, and this? And if they're like, no, then like they're not the right practitioner for you, you know? And now there's many different, through telemedicine, through access, you should be able to find. I love this group called One Medical Group. This is, I don't make money or plug in this, but because they're everywhere and they have really great Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, everybody's in it, where they all get it. And the key component to that is to create that safe space where you do feel comfortable and you create the narrative with the same practitioner, right? You have to create a relationship. That doesn't work for most places. You know, New York is a little bit different because there is still a private practice component. It's not volume based, right? Whereas most are come in, go out, go in, go out, nurse practitioners, PAs, all this stuff. You need to demand that. And it may be a little bit more work, but at the end of the day, when you create that relationship, you're able to get the care that you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been very educational.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I feel more inspired than ever to, try anal play. So that's exciting.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm going to get you that glass dilating kit. Don't worry.
Can't wait. Tell us your websites. You got a few, I think.
Yeah. So my surgical practice is Bespoke Surgical. On Insta, Bespoke Surgical. Me, if you want to see like my world of anal, 2 kids.
Education. No, that's totally different.
That's different. That's Dr. Evan Goldstein. So Dr. Evan Goldstein is that. I see a lot of concerts. I'm a music guy, so I post a lot of stuff on there.
Love that.
And then Future Method is the Future Method on Instagram. But everything else is futuremethod.com. That's the product side of what we're doing.
Get yourself a massive phone.
And then But Seriously has its own. It's butseriously.com or But Seriously. I think it's the But Seriously book.
Bunch of URLs.
Yes, all over the place. But check it out, and I appreciate it.
Audio person listening to it right now.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode today. Be sure to stay in touch with us on socials at Seggs Talk Radio Podcast. That is SEGGS Talk Radio Podcast.